Judge Kavanaugh, thank you very much. Hearing adjourned.
And that is it. After 8 or more hours, we've been listening to Donald Trump's Supreme Court pick, Brett Kavanaugh, testifying. He followed about 4 hours of testimony from his first accuser, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. Her testimony at times very emotional. She was cross-examined by a prosecutor kind of appointed by the committee. That prosecutor took the place of many of all the Republican senators who were to question Dr. Ford. That process changed when Mr. Kavanaugh took the stand, or begun to take questions. The Supreme Court pick was very emotional as well in his opening testimony, insisting that he did not do what he's accused of, that he never has. He pointed to many people who have testified as to his character via various mechanisms. And we can play a little bit of a montage, I think, right now of kind of the highlights throughout the day from each of them. So let's take a look at that.
I tried to yell for help. When I did, Brett put his hand over my mouth to stop me from yelling. This is what terrified me the most and has had the most lasting impact on my life. It was hard for me to breathe, and I thought that Brett was accidentally going to kill me. My greatest fears have been realized, and the reality has been far worse than what I expected. My family and I have been the target of constant harassment and death threats, and I have been called the most vile and hateful names imaginable. These messages, while far fewer than the expressions of support, have been terrifying and have rocked me to my core.
I never had any sexual or physical encounter of any kind with Dr. Ford. I never attended a gathering like the one Dr. Ford describes in her allegation. I've never sexually assaulted Dr. Ford or anyone. My family and my name have been totally and permanently destroyed by vicious and false additional accusations.
The CBC's Ellen Morrow is in Washington. She's been following along throughout the entire day. Ellen, we're now at the conclusion of this entire hearing. Where do things stand from your point of view? Any different than they were 8 hours ago?
Well, obviously a really remarkable day on Capitol Hill, Vashi, and that's really an understatement when you look at the testimony that we've been hearing since 10 o'clock this morning from Dr. Christine Blasey Ford and now from Brett Kavanaugh. I think what was obvious in the last part of the hearing when you had the Republicans specifically talking to Brett Kavanaugh was that this really became an exercise in partisanship in that part of the hearing. The biggest signal of that is at the beginning, you had the Republicans using Rachel Mitchell, an outside prosecutor, to ask the questions. She asked all of the Republican questions to Christine Blasey Ford this morning, and she asked the first round of Republican questions to Brett Kavanaugh. Then we got to Lindsey Graham, and the whole dynamic of this hearing in a way changed, and it became extremely partisan. And after that point, all the Republicans did speak to Brett Kavanaugh directly. They did not use Rachel Mitchell after that point, and a lot of the questioning was really pointing out attacks on the Democrats, essentially, and giving Brett Kavanaugh opportunities to appear sympathetic. The few of them said that how sorry they are for Brett Kavanaugh's family. John Cornyn said, don't give up, Judge. So that really sort of set the tone for where we are right now, which essentially this is an extremely partisan situation. If you knew how you were going to vote going into this hearing and listening to this testimony, it's unlikely that your mind changed. All eyes, though, will be on those Republican senators who were already a bit shaky going into today's hearing. Jeff Flake, who we heard from at the end of the hearing, didn't really signal at all which way he's leaning. He did not ask a question. He just spoke about humility and said how sorry he is for what both Christine Blasey Ford's family and Brett Kavanaugh's family have gone through as a result of all of this. But all eyes will be on him going forward, as well as two other Republican senators, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski.
Okay, thanks so much, Ellen. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And just for some more analysis, we're going to bring in, joining me from Washington, senior reporter for The Washington Post, Aaron Blake, and in New York, staff writer for The Atlantic, Emma Green. Hi to both of you again. Thanks for joining us. Aaron, I wanted to pick up on something our reporter Ellen was just talking about, because you had mentioned Jeff Flake being one to watch, I guess, in this crowd of people whose minds probably won't change. He made an interesting comment. He only had a minute, but he said, he sort of wanted everybody to accept the idea or recognize the idea that they probably will never move beyond doubt. What did you make of those comments?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. Certainly, he had very kind things to say about Dr. Ford this morning. He also had very kind things, notably, to say about Brett Kavanaugh. He sympathized with his plight. If I were to look at those comments and try to surmise how he's going to vote, I would guess that he would probably vote for Brett Kavanaugh, just because he did emphasize that there is a remaining doubt. He emphasized that he didn't necessarily believe one over the other. And in that case, we are dealing with a he said, she said, and a call has to be made. And since he's a Republican, I would expect that he would probably vote with Republicans on this.
Emma, we do have some breaking news, I guess, just a few minutes ago. As soon as the hearing ended, President Donald Trump tweeted, "Judge Kavanaugh showed America exactly why I nominated him. His testimony was powerful, honest, and riveting. Democrats' search and destroy strategy is disgraceful, and this process has been a total sham and effort to delay, obstruct, and resist. The Senate must vote." Your reaction?
This echoes what the Senate Republicans clearly see as a winning strategy, which is to train their focus on the Senate Democrats, make this about process and a miscarriage of justice, and to ultimately try to show that they acted improperly with this allegation, and that in itself should invalidate the allegations that Dr. Ford has made. President Trump's comments clearly show that he's more focused on performance by Kavanaugh than he is in trying to evaluate the truth of any allegation that Dr. Ford or others of the accusers have made.
And that's interesting, Aaron, because yesterday the president was asked over and over again, would he be watching? Is there any chance that he would rescind his nomination should he find the testimony compelling? He said, yes, I will be watching. That is a possibility. I mean, he obviously defended Mr. Kavanaugh over and over again, but he did make that acknowledgement yesterday, what seemed to be the headline that came out of that press conference. So is there any surprise, I guess, at what he just tweeted?
I think if you look at the president's comments over the last week plus, it has been clear that he is doubtful about Dr. Ford's story. He was very supportive of Kavanaugh throughout the process. He never said that Christine Blasey Ford is a liar necessarily, as he has referred to his own accusers in the past. He always doubted her story in more subtle ways. But it always seemed like he was more likely to believe Brett Kavanaugh. He wanted to see a strong pushback here. Brett Kavanaugh gave him exactly what he wanted to see today, clearly. And we've seen reports all day, by the way, from inside the White House, that the president was watching this display and enjoying it very much, at least the stuff that came once Brett Kavanaugh was seated.
It was interesting also, Emma, that Mr. Kavanaugh right at the end was asked whether or not he actually watched, I think it was by Kamala Harris, whether he actually watched the testimony, and he said that he had, Dr. Ford's testimony, he said he hadn't, and then tried to say as well that he planned to. What did you make of that?
It's hard to know why he wouldn't watch her testimony. You could imagine that he would be busy preparing his own, or perhaps he would be afraid that he would be swayed in some way. But certainly that could help us account for the tonal mismatch between the gentle hearing that we saw this morning, laughter, warmth, some amount of care and delicacy around Dr. Ford's testimony, and by contrast, the combativeness that we've seen throughout the hearing in this afternoon portion where Kavanaugh testified, both coming from Kavanaugh but also in Senate Republicans who came out swinging at their Democratic colleagues.
Aaron, what did you think?
It all seemed, if it wasn't planned and coordinated, and by the way, Brett Kavanaugh said that his statement had not been reviewed by anybody except for a former law clerk, but the entirety of it almost seemed like it had been coordinated. The combination of Republicans really taking it easy on Dr. Ford this morning, not really saying much outside the hearing room, and then after he delivered this real broadside against Democrats in his opening statement, especially once Lindsey Graham took his question time, they didn't send it back to Rachel Mitchell anymore. They were all very combative. it was almost like, whether through planning or because of a coincidence and because they all kind of rallied around the cause at the same point, it was almost as if this whole thing has been choreographed, and I think that's the way it really came off.
Emma, I want to ask you about something I'd been wondering about watching all this unfold and then thinking, as soon as it ended, it felt kind of abrupt. I know that's just the way it goes, but and then tomorrow they're going to be voting. What happens after that vote? If he is confirmed, is this just all, okay, it's over? I mean, what do you think the next 24 hours looks like?
Well, we've heard reports that there's going to be conferencing among the Republicans to see what their next steps are, but it does seem to be fairly clear that the Judiciary Committee, Senate Republican leadership want to bring this to a vote. Not clear if they have the vote counts to push Kavanaugh's nomination through, but if it were to be the case that in the next day, 2 days, 3 days, Senate Republicans bring this to a vote and they actually do confirm Brett Kavanaugh, I don't think this is going to go away. I think this has become an extraordinary politicized nomination. This is going to be a midterms issue no matter what the outcome. And I think there's a lot of energy around this among the American people. This wasn't just something that was contained to the circus of Washington that will fade away in the news cycle. I think people are genuinely tuned in, engaged, and upset in multiple ways about the way that this has gone down.
Aaron, what do you think? Is there a lasting impact?
Yeah, and I would argue it even goes beyond the midterm elections. This is a situation in which these hearings are being held, of course, in the climate of the Me Too movement. This whole thing has got us all talking about Clarence Thomas and how his accuser was treated 27 years ago. There is a real possibility that the swing vote on the United States Supreme Court for the foreseeable future could be occupied by a man who has, according to many people in this country, Democrats especially, this thing hanging over his head, calling into question whether he should be there in the first place. And so Republicans may push this through. They may even survive the midterm elections, but they need to think about everything and all the potential consequences of this. What if more evidence comes out in the future after they've already confirmed him? These are all things that need to go into the calculus, and maybe having that Supreme Court swing vote is all that they need. That's all they really care about. But there are many unintended consequences that can come out of this.
Does it appear to you, Emma, that it did go into the calculus at all?
I do think that everybody has been watching this unfold, not only with the eye to getting that Supreme Court confirmation, but also with an eye to the political implications. But the other aspect of this that I was watching for as Rachel Mitchell went through her questioning both of Dr. Ford and of Kavanaugh is whether there could also be legal implications, whether prosecutors in Maryland might decide to open investigations. I talked to a legal expert today who said that it's possible that this hearing could have built enough evidence for a potential grand jury indictment or investigation if local prosecutors in Maryland decide to take up this case. So there could be many ways that are unforeseeable at this moment that this could come back to bite Republicans and to really continue affecting Kavanaugh.
Aaron, I know you said it should be part of the calculus going forward, but do you think it was part of the calculus in what we've just watched unfold?
I think that once Kavanaugh was the nominee, they were going to have to go for it regardless. I think that withdrawing it would have been seen as a capitulation. It would have depressed the Republican Party base. They might have gotten another Supreme Court justice in there in his place. But I think in some ways this is about inertia. Once you nominate the person, you take him all the way through. You try to confirm him. Republicans don't want to risk any way, shape, or form not having this Supreme Court vacancy filled by a conservative. They could throw in the towel on Kavanaugh and try somebody else, probably get them confirmed in the lame duck session. But if Democrats win the Senate in November, that could throw the whole thing into doubt. That could eventually even prevent Republicans from getting a conservative justice. And that's just not something that's acceptable for them, especially given how important the Supreme Court is for policymaking in America right now, with Congress largely stuck in gridlock.
Okay, I'm out of time. I have to leave it there. But thank you so much to both of you. Thanks to Emma Green of The Atlantic and Aaron Blake of The Washington Post.